Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into Coupang, the South Korean e-commerce kind of giant,
Yeah.
using their 2023 annual report.
Yeah, what's really fascinating about Coupang is that they really managed to not just survive, but actually thrive in such a unique and dynamic market like South Korea.
Exactly. It's not your typical e-commerce playground.
Yeah.
For anyone who's maybe not familiar with Coupang, they're often called the Amazon of South Korea, but I feel like they really have their own unique kind of twist on things.
Yeah.
We're talking everything from groceries to gadgets, delivered crazy fast, often like same-day delivery.
That's definitely been like a key differentiator for them. And in a market that's, as digitally savvy and as demanding as South Korea, that customer-centric approach, particularly that focus on rapid delivery, that has been like really instrumental in their success.
For sure. So let's kind of unpack how this translates into their business segments, because I think this is where things get really interesting. So they have their core business, product commerce, which focuses on online sales of products that they actually own.
Right.
And then they have developing offerings, which includes commissions from third-party sellers, their Rocket Fresh food delivery service, and advertising revenue.
And what really kind of caught my eye was their strategic shift within their fulfillment and logistics by Coupang program, or FLC for short.
Okay.
In the simplest terms, FLC is basically a service where Coupang will handle warehousing, packing, and shipping for these third-party sellers.
Gotcha.
What's interesting, though, is they decided to transition from acting as the principal, meaning the seller of record, to an agent in these transactions.
Okay, now that sounds like a pretty significant shift. What was the kind of the thought process behind that?
Well, it really boils down to streamlining operations and potentially attracting way more sellers to the platform.
He said.
So by acting as an agent, Coupang can really simplify the process for merchants and themselves, which could lead to greater participation, which, ultimately drives revenue growth in the long run. But here's the intriguing part. This shift actually reduced their reported revenue in the short term.
Wait, really? So they made a change that actually decreased their revenue?
Yeah, it sounds kind of counterintuitive at first.
That's wild.
But it's a classic example of, playing the long game.
Right.
While their reported revenue might have dipped, the impact on their gross profit was actually pretty minimal.
Okay.
So essentially, they're betting that by attracting more merchants to FLC, it'll pay off big time in the long run.
So it's like taking a small step back to take a huge leap forward.
It's a bold move, and it'll be fascinating to see how this plays out.
Yeah, for sure. So with all these moving pieces, how did Coupang actually perform financially in 2023?
Yeah, now we're getting to the good stuff.
Right.
Overall, it's a story of impressive growth despite some inherent challenges, right?
Right.
So their total net revenue, which factors in the impact of that FLC strategic shift, still managed to increase by a respectable 20% in constant currency.
Okay, so 20%, not too bad.
Not bad at all, especially considering those unique challenges of the South Korean market.
Yeah, exactly.
But revenue is only one piece of the puzzle. What about their customer base? Are they attracting new shoppers?
They absolutely are. Their active customer base grew significantly, from 18.1 million in 2022 to 21 million in 2023.
Wow. Okay.
Which is a strong indicator for their potential for continued revenue growth.
Right. More customers, more potential sales, good for investors.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're growing, they're attracting your customers, but the real question is, are they actually making money?
Right. Profitability, that's the ultimate test.
Exactly.
And the answer is a resounding yes, and they're actually getting much better at it. Their adjusted EBITDA, which is a key metric for measuring operational profitability, increased significantly.
Okay.
The margins expanding from 1.9% to 4.4%.
Wow.
Now, for those who might not be familiar with adjusted EBITDA, it essentially strips away certain costs like depreciation and amortization to give a clearer picture of the company's actual operating performance. So they're not just growing, but they're becoming more efficient at turning that revenue into profit.
Exactly.
Which is always a great sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
Long-term health of the business.
Right.
But to really kind of grasp all the nuances of Coupang's financial performance, we've got to dig a little deeper.
Right.
So let's start by breaking down their income statement.
Sure.
What are some of the key takeaways there? What should we really be paying attention to?
All right, so their primary revenue stream, which is their net retail sales, which includes revenue from product commerce, grew by a healthy 16% as reported and 17% in constant currency.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah, and that growth is driven primarily by two factors: attracting new customers and increasing spending from those existing customers.
Okay.
So that really customer-centric approach, the focus on fast delivery, it's resonating with these shoppers,
Yeah.
leading to, repeat business and increased loyalty.
So they're building a loyal following, which is critical,
Yeah,
especially in that e-commerce world.
absolutely.
But what about their other revenue stream, those developing offerings?
That's where things get even more interesting. Their net other revenue, which includes those offerings, saw a 41% growth as reported and 42% in constant currency.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
Yeah, and this clearly indicates that their efforts to diversify those revenue streams, things like Rocket Fresh, are really paying off.
So it's not just about selling products anymore. It's about creating this whole ecosystem
Yeah,
of services that meet a wider range of customer needs.
precisely.
Smart move, considering, if you're relying only on one revenue stream and things change, you could be in trouble.
Right, exactly. So by expanding into these new areas, they're creating multiple avenues for growth and reducing their vulnerability to, market fluctuations or just changes in consumer behavior in general.
All right, so we've got a pretty good handle on their revenue now. But what about the other side of the equation, their expenses? How effectively are they managing those costs as they continue to scale?
That's where their adjusted EBITDA margin expansion comes into play. Remember, it jumped from 1.9% to 4.4%.
Yes.
So this really significant improvement indicates that they're becoming more efficient at managing those operating expenses, even while they're investing heavily in growth.
Gotcha.
It's a tough balancing act.
Yeah.
And so far, they seem to be managing it well.
So it's not just about growing revenue, it's about growing it profitably.
Exactly.
Now let's kind of switch gears and take a peek at their balance sheet,
Okay.
which gives us a snapshot of their financial health and stability. Any red flags there?
Nothing super alarming jumps out,
Okay.
but it is important to note that as Coupang continues to invest aggressively in growth, their debt levels have obviously increased.
Okay.
They are using debt strategically to fuel their expansion, but it's something we should keep an eye on as we move forward.
That makes sense.
Mm,
Debt can be a powerful tool,
it can.
but it needs to be managed very carefully.
Absolutely.
Now, what about cash flow? That's the lifeblood of any business.
It is.
Are they generating enough cash to cover their operations and those investments?
Yes, their cash flow statement is actually very positive.
Okay.
They generated positive free cash flow in 2023,
Okay.
which means they have cash left over after covering their operating expenses and capital expenditures.
So they're not just profitable on paper, they're generating actual cash.
Exactly, which gives them a lot of flexibility. They can reinvest that cash in future growth initiatives, they can pay down that debt that we talked about, or even consider returning some of that value to shareholders.
Speaking of shareholder value, did Coupang buy back any shares or pay any dividends in 2023?
No, neither. Which isn't too surprising considering they're still in a growth phase.
Right.
They're very clearly prioritizing reinvestment back into their business over immediate shareholder payouts.
Okay, so no immediate rewards, but those long-term investors are probably hoping to see that value returned eventually.
Of course, that's always like a key consideration for any investor.
For sure.
But for now, Coupang seems laser focused on really solidifying its position in the market and grabbing an even larger share of that, ever-growing e-commerce pie.
Yeah. All right, it makes sense.
Yeah,
They're building for the future, and it definitely looks like a really exciting future.
it does.
No deep dive is complete without acknowledging some of the potential downsides.
Right.
And in Coupang's case, there are definitely a few significant ones to consider.
Yeah.
Let's start by talking about those geopolitical risks.
Okay. So tensions with North Korea really casts a long shadow over, all South Korean companies.
Right.
Coupang is no exception to that.
Yeah.
Any escalation in the region could, disrupt their operations,
Yeah.
send shockwaves through the market, for sure.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. Geopolitical risks are always a wild card,
Yeah.
especially in that part of the world.
For sure.
But beyond just the headlines, what are some of those specific challenges Coupang is facing within the industry?
I mean, competition is a major one, right? As Coupang expands into new product categories and ventures outside of South Korea, they're going to encounter much fiercer competition
Right.
from established players, but also these niche retailers. Maintaining their competitive edge is going to require constant innovation and strategic investments just to stay ahead of the game.
So it's like they're entering this whole new arena with all these seasoned players.
Yeah, for sure.
What specific strategies are they using to kind of fend off that competition?
Well, their relentless focus on customer experience is a major weapon in their arsenal.
Okay.
That commitment to super fast delivery, we talked about that earlier.
Right.
That's a key differentiator.
Yeah.
Especially in today's world where people want things like right now.
Yeah, instant gratification.
Exactly.
So it's got to be fast.
Yeah.
But fast, and also they got to have what people want.
Absolutely.
How are they managing their logistics and supply chain to keep up with that kind of demand?
That's where their massive investments in technology and infrastructure really come into play. They've built this, sophisticated logistics network, enables them to, fulfill these orders super quickly and efficiently, even as their order volume keeps climbing. It's a complex operation for sure, and it requires constant fine-tuning to make sure it's effective.
So it's like they've built this well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
But it requires that constant maintenance and upgrades to keep it running smoothly.
For sure.
But even with the best technology and logistics, there are always those external factors that can kind of throw a wrench in things.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. And regulatory uncertainties are a prime example of that, right?
Yeah.
Navigating South Korea's regulatory landscape can be very complex, and specific laws, especially those related to emergencies, could impose some restrictions on their operations.
Right, because every company's got to play by the rules of the game.
Yeah.
And those rules can change.
They can,
especially in such a fast-paced industry.
For sure.
What are some of those specific hurdles they're facing right now?
One area that's been particularly tricky is data privacy.
Okay.
Like any e-commerce giant, Coupang collects a ton of data on their customers. And South Korea has very strict laws about how that data can be collected, how it's stored, and how it's used.
Yeah, making sure all that stuff is compliant.
Absolutely, which is crucial, but it can also be costly and complex to manage.
Right. So it's a reminder that in this digital age, data is kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It's an asset, but it can also be a liability.
Absolutely.
Companies have to strike that balance between using it to improve the customer experience, but also protecting it responsibly.
Exactly. And it's not just about, complying with current regulations.
Right.
It's about anticipating and adapting to future changes in the regulatory landscape.
Yeah, staying ahead of the curve.
Right, which requires a super proactive approach and a deep understanding of those evolving legal and ethical issues surrounding data privacy.
Speaking of those ethical considerations, Coupang has faced some criticism regarding its labor practices.
Right.
Particularly the conditions in their warehouses.
Yeah.
How are they addressing those concerns?
Yeah, so Coupang has definitely been under scrutiny for those, demanding work environments in their fulfillment centers.
Right.
And in response to that, they have taken steps to improve those conditions.
Yeah.
Things like increasing wages, reducing work hours, and investing in safety measures.
Okay, so taking some steps in the right direction.
Right. It's an ongoing process for sure.
Yeah.
And they're going to need to keep demonstrating that commitment to worker well-being to really maintain that positive public image.
It's a reminder that corporate social responsibility is becoming more important than ever.
Absolutely.
Especially for companies that rely on a large workforce.
For sure.
Customers are way more aware these days about where and how products are made.
Right.
And the companies that really prioritize ethical practices, they're likely to have a competitive advantage in the long run.
Absolutely. Now, let's go back to their financials for a second.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that their debt levels have gone up as they've been investing in growth.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, I'm curious about those specifics. How much debt are they carrying and what are the terms?
Well, if you look at their balance sheet, their total debt at the end of 2023 was insert specific debt amount from balance sheet.
Okay.
Now, it's important to put that number in context.
Right.
While it's true that their debt has increased, their ability to actually service that debt has also improved.
Okay.
Remember, they're generating that positive free cash flow.
Yes.
Which means they have the resources to meet their financial obligations.
Okay, so they're not over-leveraged and they got that cash flow coming in to cover those debt payments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what about their overall capital structure?
Yeah.
Are they relying too much on debt, or do they have a healthy mix of debt and equity financing?
Yeah, that's a key question.
It is a key question for any investor.
Yeah.
And for Coupang, it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Okay.
Their debt-to-equity ratio, which is a key metric for assessing financial leverage, is currently sitting at insert specific debt-to-equity ratio from balance sheet, which is, it's a little bit on the high side, but it's not necessarily alarm bells ringing, especially when you consider their strong cash flow and that growth trajectory.
Right. So it's something to keep an eye on, but not a reason to panic just yet.
Exactly.
Now, switching gears a little bit, let's talk about their future outlook.
Okay.
They've clearly established themselves as this dominant force in South Korea's e-commerce market.
Yeah.
But what are their ambitions beyond their home turf?
That's the question on a lot of investors' minds.
It is.
And based on their recent moves, it looks like Coupang has some global aspirations.
Okay.
They've already started expanding into new markets like Taiwan and Japan.
Okay.
And there have been hints about even bolder international plans down the line.
That's exciting.
It is, but expanding internationally is no easy feat.
It's not, yeah.
No.
What are some of the challenges they're going to face as they kind of venture into these new territories?
Well, first off, they're going to need to adapt their business model to these different cultural contexts and consumer preferences. What flies in South Korea might not necessarily work the same way in other markets.
Right, totally different ballgame.
It is, and then they also have to navigate different regulations, build new logistics networks, and establish their brand awareness in these completely unfamiliar territories.
Yeah, so in a way, they're kind of starting from scratch,
In some ways, yeah.
even though they're this giant in their own market.
It's a unique challenge.
It is. So how are they approaching these challenges?
They're taking a very measured and strategic approach,
Okay.
really focusing on markets where they see that greatest potential for success.
Okay.
And they're leveraging their existing expertise in tech and logistics to build a scalable platform that can be adapted to those different regions.
So they're learning from that playbook of those other global e-commerce companies who have done this before.
Yeah, taking a phased approach.
Right.
Picking their battles strategically.
Makes sense. Now, let's talk about something that I think is super intriguing about Coupang.
Okay.
Their commitment to innovation. They're not just an e-commerce company. They're really pushing those boundaries
They are.
of what's possible in that digital space.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about some of their most innovative initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, their rocket delivery service,
Yeah.
which offers same-day or next-day delivery for a huge range of products.
That's crazy.
It's a testament to their logistical capabilities.
Right.
And it's been a complete game changer in South Korea, setting a new standard for delivery speed and convenience.
Yeah, for sure.
And they've also been experimenting with drone delivery,
Wow.
which is even further pushing that envelope of what's possible in last-mile logistics.
It's like they're bringing the future to us right now.
Yeah.
But beyond rapid delivery, what other innovations are they kind of pursuing?
They've been making huge strides in mobile payments with Coupang Pay,
Okay.
which has become a really popular choice for online and offline transactions in South Korea.
Okay.
And they've even ventured into streaming video with Coupang Play, aiming to compete with, those big players like Netflix and Disney Plus.
So they're not content with just dominating e-commerce. They want to be like this whole digital ecosystem.
Right. They want to offer a whole suite of services that cater to every aspect of their customers' lives.
And that ambition is reflected in their company culture,
Absolutely.
which really encourages that experimentation and risk-taking.
Yeah, they're not afraid to try new things, even if they might fail sometimes.
Yeah.
And that kind of bold mindset is crucial for any company that wants to stay ahead of the curve.
It's that Silicon Valley mentality, embracing disruption,
For sure.
constantly looking for that next big thing.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on something we haven't talked about yet.
Okay.
Their corporate governance and leadership.
Yeah.
Can you shed some light on their management team and how they approach running the company?
Absolutely. So Coupang is led by its founder and CEO, Bom Kim,
Okay.
who is, a visionary entrepreneur who's been instrumental in their success.
Mhm.
Okay.
He's known for his long-term thinking, his customer-centric approach, and that relentless pursuit of innovation we've been talking about.
So he's kind of a rock star.
Yeah, he's definitely seen as a disruptor and a game changer in the tech world.
Right.
But what about the rest of the management team?
Yeah. Are they experienced? Can they guide the company through this next phase of growth?
They're incredibly experienced.
Okay.
Coupang has put together a really strong leadership team with deep expertise in e-commerce, technology, and finance.
Okay.
They brought in seasoned execs from companies like Amazon, Google, and Goldman Sachs,
Wow.
combining that Silicon Valley know-how with a deep understanding of the South Korean market.
So like that perfect blend of East meets West.
Yeah.
Now, one
Yeah.
thing that caught my eye when I was looking through their annual report was their executive compensation plan.
Okay.
Specifically, those clawback provisions.
Right.
Can you explain what those are and why they're important?
Yeah, so clawback provisions are basically clauses in a contract.
That allow the company to take back executive compensation
I
if it turns out later that those execs engaged in misconduct, or if the company's financial performance was misrepresented.
So it's like a way to hold those execs accountable,
Yeah,
make sure their interests are aligned with the shareholders,
exactly.
which is a good thing.
It is, especially given some of those recent corporate scandals
Yeah.
involving executive compensation.
Right,
It
exactly.
really shows that commitment to transparency and responsible governance.
Yeah.
And in Coupang's case, it's particularly interesting because their compensation plan is already pretty generous.
Right.
They're willing to pay top dollar for talent,
Yeah.
but they're also saying, hey, these rewards are contingent on you behaving ethically
Yeah.
and making sure the financial performance is solid.
It's a smart move.
Yeah,
It signals to those investors that they're taking that corporate governance seriously,
absolutely.
which can be a big factor in those investment decisions.
Right.
Now, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you one final question. What's your overall assessment of the company's future prospects?
Yeah.
Are they set up for continued success, or are there some storm clouds on the horizon?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is.
And like most things in life, it's complicated.
Right.
Coupang's got a lot going for it. They're dominant in this rapidly growing market. They've got a visionary leader.
Right.
They're financially solid.
Yeah.
And they are relentless innovators.
So they've got all the ingredients
They do.
for success. But what about those risks we discussed earlier?
Right.
Those geopolitical uncertainties, the intense competition,
Yeah.
the regulatory hurdles.
Yeah.
How much of a threat do those pose?
Those are definitely real risks. We can't ignore those.
Right.
But Coupang has proven that they can handle tough situations.
Right.
They adapt to change well.
Yeah.
Their commitment to the customer, their use of technology, and that strategic way they approach expansion, those all give them an edge.
Yeah. So it's a delicate balancing act.
It is.
They got huge potential, but they also got those significant challenges to face.
For sure.
What should investors be watching closely as this Coupang story unfolds?
A few key factors are going to determine their path in the next few years.
Okay.
First, can they keep up that rapid growth
Yeah.
while expanding into new markets and offering new products?
Okay.
Second, can they successfully navigate those complex regulations in South Korea and other countries?
Right.
Third, can they manage their debt and keep a healthy financial picture as they invest and grow in the business?
Okay. So keeping an eye on those financials.
Yeah, and finally, can they attract and keep the best people?
Right. That talent pool is so important.
It's super competitive out there.
It is.
So those are the things to watch.
Okay. Yeah. Those are all really crucial points.
They are.
Sounds like Coupang's journey is going to be filled with both, incredible opportunities and challenges.
Yeah, for sure.
What's your final thought for our listeners as they consider Coupang as a potential investment?
I think Coupang is such a fascinating company. They've got a bold vision and a proven track record of success.
Yeah.
They're not without risks, but they
Yeah.
also have the potential to really change the e-commerce world.
Right.
Investors who are comfortable with a little bit more risk
Yeah.
and who believe in the long-term growth potential of e-commerce,
Right.
particularly in Asia, they might find Coupang to be a really attractive investment opportunity.
Yeah. It's definitely a story worth following closely.
For sure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Of course, it's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time for another insightful look at a company making waves in the business world.
They're operating in a region that is prone to earthquakes, tsunamis, other natural disasters.
Right. Yeah.
And the global economy is always, susceptible to shocks, as we know.
For sure.
So how are they actually, mitigating those risks?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So they've invested a lot in building that, resilient infrastructure, things like earthquake-resistant warehouses and having backup power systems.
Bizarre.
And they've got these contingency plans in place to, manage supply chain disruptions and keep things running if, the unexpected happens.
So they're not just crossing their fingers and hoping for the best.
No, they're definitely preparing for those worst-case scenarios.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, it is. But, even with all that prep, Some events are just like totally out of their control.
Right. Yeah. Acts of God, you can't always predict those.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder that no business is immune to those external shocks, you know?
Right.
But Coupang has really shown this agility and adaptability, and that's been a key part of their success.
You've been pretty resilient.
They have
Yeah.
willing to change their strategies when they need to, which is, essential in a market that's constantly changing.
That's true. And they were really resilient during COVID,
Yeah.
which, that accelerated e-commerce even more. Looking ahead, what are some of those key trends that could shape Coupang's future?
I think one really important trend is that growing importance of sustainability.
Yeah, okay.
Consumers are demanding more eco-friendly products and practices.
Yeah, for sure.
And companies that don't keep up, they could face backlash.
Definitely.
Coupang has already started doing things to lessen their environmental impact,
Okay.
like using electric delivery vehicles and trying to use more sustainable packaging.
Those are good steps.
They are, but they've got to keep pushing in this area to stay ahead of the game.
Yeah, sustainability is not just a nice thing to do anymore. It's like a necessity.
Exactly.
But beyond environmental concerns, what other trends are they watching?
Another big one is AI and automation.
Right.
Coupang's already using AI for things like personalized recommendations, optimizing their logistics,
Right.
Improving that customer experience.
Yeah.
But as AI keeps getting better, I think we'll see even more uses for it in e-commerce.
Yeah, for sure.
And the companies that can really harness AI effectively, they're going to have a big advantage.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So it seems like Coupang is in a good spot to take advantage of these trends.
I think so.
They're innovative. They're not afraid of new tech.
Yeah.
But as they keep growing and expanding, how are they planning to keep that company culture and those values intact?
That's a tough question for any company that's scaling up so quickly.
It is. It's tricky.
Coupang's known for this fast-paced, results-oriented culture,
Right.
which has worked really well for them.
Yeah.
But as they hire more people from different backgrounds, it's super important to make sure everyone's on the same page with those core values.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keeping that entrepreneurial spirit, but also adapt into a bigger, more complex organization.
Exactly. And how are they doing that? Well, they've got these initiatives to build that strong culture,
Right.
like leadership programs, employee groups, regular communication from the CEO.
Okay.
They're also really emphasizing diversity and inclusion, making a workplace where everyone feels valued.
That's awesome. Those are all really positive steps.
They are. It seems like they're really proactive about building a workplace that's both sustainable and inclusive.
That's great. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Coupang, what's your final thought for our listeners who might be considering investing in this company?
I think Coupang is a company that's really shaking things up in the e-commerce world,
Nice. Right.
Innovative approach, customer-focused, and they really want to grow.
Yeah.
But they're in a market that's constantly changing.
Right.
Lots of opportunities, but also challenges.
For sure.
So for investors looking for a high-growth company with strong leadership
Yeah.
and a real focus on innovation, Coupang might be a good option.
It could be.
But always remember, every investment has risks.
Right.
Do your research, think about your goals before jumping in.
Those are some wise words.
Mm-hmm.
Informed investing is a journey, not a sprint to the finish line.
Well said.
So keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and keep learning. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating world of Coupang, and we'll see you next time.